At 22, I thought graduating with honors from UC Berkeley would be the proudest day of my life. Instead, it became the day my father publicly disowned me in front of everyone I knew. What he didn't expect was that I had been carrying his darkest secret for years, and I finally had nothing left to lose by revealing it. Before I dive into the most painful day of my life, let me know where you're listening from, and be sure to like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the moment I finally confronted the man who never believed in me. Growing up in the Chicago suburbs with my father, Matthew, was like living under a microscope that could never quite focus. No matter what I achieved, the image was always a little blurry in his eyes, never sharp enough to earn true recognition. Our two-story colonial home, with its manicured lawn and gleaming windows, mirrored the flawless image my father worked tirelessly to project to the world. Matthew Richards wasn't just my father. He was an institution. He stood 6'2", with a head of silver hair that never dared to fall out of place, and he commanded every room with the same quiet authority he wielded over our family. His voice rarely rose above a certain decibel. It didn't have to. A slight shift in his tone could silence our entire dinner table faster than a judge's gavel. As the CFO of a respected financial firm in downtown Chicago, my father believed success had a very specific definition, one that involved Harvard Business School, his alma mater, seven-figure bonuses, and the respect of men in similar suits, with similar watches and similar worldviews. There was no room for deviation in the Richards family success manual. My mother, Diana, lived in his shadow. Her once vibrant personality had faded over 25 years of marriage, becoming a pale reflection of his preferences. She had an art history degree and dreamed of curating museum collections, but instead, she became the curator of our family's social calendar and my father's impeccable image. I would sometimes catch glimpses of the woman she used to be when she'd sneak me away to art exhibits while my father was on business trips, her eyes lighting up in a way they never did at home. "Your father means well," became her mantra, whispered to me after a particularly harsh critique of my report card, where an A- in calculus was treated like a moral failing, or my choice of extracurriculars. Debate team was acceptable. Drama club was not. My brothers, James and Tyler, 4 and 2 years my senior, had long ago surrendered to the Richards family path. James, the perfect firstborn, mirrored my father in every way, from his choice of a business major at Northwestern to his penchant for crisp dress shirts and disapproving glances. Tyler had shown brief flashes of rebellion, a semester abroad in Spain that almost turned into a gap year, until my father personally flew out to course-correct him. He eventually fell in line, joining Dad's firm after graduating from the University of Chicago's business school. I was different. From the beginning, while my brothers played stock market simulators with our father on weekends, I was lost in books about the Supreme Court and civil rights movements. The dinner table became a battlefield in my high school years, with heated discussions that always ended the same way. My father dismissing my idealistic notions while my mother nervously rearranged the food on her plate. "Law is for those who couldn't make it in finance," he'd say, cutting his steak with precision. "It's reactive, not proactive. You wait for problems instead of preventing them." The irony of that statement would only become clear to me years later. My academic achievements piled up through high school. Debate team captain, National Merit Scholar, perfect SAT scores. But in my father's eyes, they were always slightly off the mark. "Imagine if you could apply that intelligence to something practical," he'd say, turning accomplishments into missed opportunities. The breaking point came my senior year, when the college acceptance letters arrived. I had applied to business programs to appease him, but also to pre-law tracks at several universities. The day I got my acceptance to Berkeley, with a substantial scholarship, was the day I decided to forge my own path. I can still remember the family meeting I called, my hands shaking, but my voice steady, as I announced my decision to pursue law at Berkeley. My mother's eyes widened with a mixture of pride and terror. James scoffed. Tyler stared at his shoes. My father's reaction was one of glacial calculation. "Berkeley," he said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. California, pre-law. Each phrase dropped into the silence of our living room like a stone in a still pond. I see. What followed wasn't the explosion I'd expected, but something far more devastating. I have set aside funds for your education based on certain expectations, he said, in the same tone he used to discuss investment portfolios. Those funds were intended for a proper business education that would secure your future. If you choose this other path, you will do so without my financial support. You're cutting me off because I want to study law instead of business? My voice sounded foreign in my own ears. I am reallocating resources where they will generate a better return, he corrected, as if I were a disappointing stock, not his daughter. The choice is yours, Natalie. My mother tried to intervene, her voice small. Matthew, surely we can. The decision is made, Diana. He cut her off without even looking at her. Later that night, my mother slipped into my room as I was furiously researching student loans and other scholarship opportunities. He'll come around, she whispered, though her eyes told a different story. She pressed an envelope into my hand. It's not much, just what I've saved from my personal account. He doesn't know. Inside was $5,000, the first installment of my independence, and the first crack in my perception of my parents' united front. 2 months later, I left for California with 2 suitcases, my mother's hidden contribution, and a determination to succeed that burned hotter than any approval my father had ever denied me. Arriving in the Bay Area with nothing but ambition and anxiety was both terrifying and exhilarating. The Berkeley campus buzzed with an energy so different from the buttoned-up Chicago suburbs I'd left behind. Here, people debated ideas passionately, without the conversation ending in stony silence. Professors encouraged you to question the status quo, not preserve it. For the first time, I felt like I could fully breathe. But freedom came at a steep price. My scholarship covered tuition, but little else. My mother's $5,000 vanished quickly into security deposits, textbooks, and basic necessities. While my old high school classmates posted pictures of parent-funded spring breaks, I was juggling 3 jobs: morning shifts at a campus coffee shop, evening shifts at the library, and weekend work as a research assistant for a law professor. My tiny shared apartment in a rundown building became both my sanctuary and my prison. Many nights I'd fall asleep at my desk, waking with the imprint of textbook pages on my cheek and 3 hours to get ready for my next class. My roommate, Stephanie, a sociology major from Seattle, would find me like that and drape a blanket over my shoulders, leaving encouraging sticky notes on my forehead. You know, most people use beds, she teased one morning, handing me a cup of coffee as I peeled a yellow Post-it from my face. Revolutionary concept. Stephanie became the first member of the family I chose. Raquel joined our circle next, a fiery environmental science major who organized campus protests and taught me that passion didn't have to be quiet and contained, as I'd been raised to believe. Marcos, with his computer science brilliance and an unexpected love for constitutional law debates, completed our core group. None of them understood family pressure quite like I did, but they understood something just as important: how to support someone who was figuring out who they were outside of their family's expectations. Blood doesn't define family, Raquel would say during our late-night study sessions, whenever I'd get a particularly cold email from my father inquiring about my GPA with no other personal content. Actions do. Those words became my mantra through 4 years of minimal contact with my father. My mother called weekly, her voice always dropping to a whisper at some point to ask if I needed anything, though we both knew her resources were limited. My brother Tyler sent occasional, awkward but well-meaning texts, never mentioning our father. James remained my father's shadow, reaching out only on birthdays with formal messages that read like business correspondence. Professor Eleanor Williams became another pivotal figure in my college journey. A brilliant constitutional law expert with a reputation for being tough but fair. She became the mentor I had always craved. After grilling me relentlessly during a freshman seminar, she asked me to stay after class. "You argue like someone who's been defending herself her whole life," she observed, leaning against her desk. "That's not a criticism. It's a strength if you channel it correctly. Under her guidance, I transformed from a student desperately trying to prove her worth into a scholar confident in her own analysis. In my junior year, she recommended me for an internship at Goldstein and Parker, a prestigious firm specializing in corporate liability cases. The irony of focusing on holding companies accountable for ethical breaches was not lost on me, though I kept my personal motivations to myself. The internship was a turning point. Working alongside lawyers who used their business acumen to fight corruption rather than profit from it showed me an alternate path my father had never acknowledged. My supervisor, Laura Goldstein herself, took notice of my dedication. "Richards," she said one evening as we prepped for a major case, "you have a rare ability to understand how these corporations think, while holding on to your moral compass. That's rare. We need more lawyers like you." Her words validated the path I had chosen in a way no grade or award ever could. By senior year, I was at the top of my class, president of the Pre-Law Society, and had been accepted early to 3 top-tier law schools, including my dream school, Yale. The cost had been high. I was perpetually exhausted, running on fumes, and had seen my bank account dip to near zero more times than I could count. But I was making it happen. As graduation approached, I sent formal invitations to my family, more out of obligation than expectation. 3 weeks before the ceremony, I received a short email from my mother. "Natalie, we won't be able to make it to your graduation. Your father has an important client meeting that weekend that can't be rescheduled. I'm so sorry, dear. I am so very proud of you. Love, Mom." The sting of disappointment was sharp, but not surprising. I had learned to manage my expectations when it came to family support. My friends rallied around me, making elaborate plans for a celebration that would make up for my family's absence. "We'll cheer so loud when they call your name, you won't even notice they're not there," Raquel promised, already designing matching t-shirts for our group to wear. I convinced myself I was at peace with their absence. Maybe it was for the best. No tension, no disapproving glances, just pure celebration with the people who had actually supported me through the entire journey. I would graduate on my own terms, just as I had gotten through college. What I didn't know was that fate had a different kind of ceremony in store, one that would permanently alter the dynamics of the Richards family in ways none of us could have foreseen. The morning of graduation dawned with perfect Berkeley weather, sunny, with just enough of a breeze to keep the polyester gowns from becoming unbearable. Stephanie woke me by jumping on my bed, already in her cap and gown. "Arise, future Supreme Court Justice," she announced, flinging open the curtains with a theatrical flair. "Today, we become educated adults, officially qualified to be in debt for the next decade." Raquel arrived moments later with bagels and the custom t-shirts for our post-ceremony celebration. Marcos followed with his parents, who insisted on adopting me for the day and brought me flowers and a card that made me cry before I'd even brushed my teeth. "None of that," Marcos's mother, June, chided gently, dabbing at my eyes. "You'll ruin your makeup, and we need you looking fierce in all the pictures we're about to take." We got to the ceremony venue early, joining the organized chaos of graduates finding their places and adjusting each other's caps. My friends' families fussed over all of us equally, straightening our tassels and taking countless photos. The hollow ache I expected to feel from my own family's absence was filled by their genuine warmth and excitement. As we lined up for the procession, I scanned the assembled crowd out of habit, not expecting to see any familiar faces beyond our cheering section. And then I saw them, 4 rows back, on the left aisle. My father, ramrod straight in an expensive suit that looked out of place among the more casual California crowd. My mother beside him, clutching her purse. James and Tyler flanking them like bookends. My heart hammered so violently I nearly lost my balance. Raquel gripped my elbow. "What is it?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "They're here," I whispered, unable to tear my gaze away. "My family. They actually came." Raquel followed my gaze, her expression tightening just a fraction. She'd heard enough stories over the past 4 years to form her own opinion of my father. "Well," she said finally, squeezing my hand. Now they get to see what they almost lost. The ceremony passed in a blur. When they called out Natalie Richards, summa cum laude, my friends erupted in cheers, just as they'd promised. From my place on the stage, I could see my mother clapping enthusiastically, Tyler joining in with a genuine smile. James offered a moderate applause. My father's hands met exactly 3 times, the bare minimum of acknowledgement. Still, they had come. That had to mean something. After the ceremony, I navigated the crowd toward them, my pulse a frantic mix of hope and dread. My mother reached me first, pulling me into a perfumed hug. "I am so proud of you," she whispered fiercely. So proud. Tyler gave me an awkward but heartfelt hug. "Good job, sis. Berkeley looks good on you." James offered a firm handshake. "Congratulations on your achievement." My father stood slightly apart, appraising me as if I were a balance sheet with troubling figures. "Natalie," he said finally, extending a formal hand, "congratulations." I shook it, the familiar distance palpable despite our physical closeness. "Thank you for coming. I thought you had an important meeting." "Plans change," he replied enigmatically. Before the conversation could grow more strained, Stephanie arrived with her family, followed by Raquel, Marcos, and his parents. Introductions were made, my friends' families filling the awkward silences with cheerful chatter about the ceremony and celebration plans. "We've made lunch reservations for everyone at Bayside," Marcos's father announced. "Our treat. We're celebrating all these incredible graduates." My father tensed at being swept into someone else's plans, but my mother quickly interjected, "How thoughtful. We'd be delighted." The lunch at the restaurant was an exercise in colliding worlds. My California life crashed into my Chicago past as talk of law school plans and campus memories mingled uncomfortably with my father's pointed questions about starting salaries and firm rankings. While my friends' parents spoke of their children with unabashed pride, my father found a way to turn every one of my achievements into a question. Yale Law? An interesting choice. I would have thought Harvard a better fit for serious career objectives. A focus on constitutional law? Rather abstract when corporate law offers more substantial opportunities. President of the student union? Administrative experience is valuable, I suppose, but I wonder if your time wouldn't have been better spent in judicial clerkships. With each comment, my friends exchanged glances, their parents growing visibly perplexed by my father's inability to simply celebrate his daughter's accomplishments. My mother kept trying to redirect the conversation, while my brothers looked increasingly uncomfortable. As lunch wore on, Tyler made a genuine effort to connect, asking about my favorite classes and experiences in California. When I mentioned Professor Williams and her mentorship, he seemed genuinely interested. "She sounds amazing," he said. "You always needed strong teachers who challenged you." My father cut in before I could respond. "What Natalie has always needed is practical guidance. These academic mentors fill students' heads with idealistic notions that have no application in the real world." An awkward silence fell over the table. Marcos's mother, June, who had been warm and effusive all day, finally spoke up. "Well, from what we've seen, your daughter has a remarkable ability to translate her education into practical skills. Her work with that corporate accountability firm was quite impressive." My father's eyebrows rose slightly. "Corporate accountability? What exactly does that entail?" The tone of his voice sent a knot forming in my stomach. We were approaching dangerous territory. "We investigate corporate fraud and represent whistleblowers," I explained carefully. "The firm specializes in cases where companies have misled investors or engaged in financial misconduct." Something flickered across my father's face. So quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't spent a lifetime studying his expressions for signs of approval or disapproval. "It sounds like glorified tattling," he said dismissively. "The business world requires discretion and loyalty." "I think it requires ethics and transparency," I countered before I could stop myself. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother's hand flew to her necklace, her telltale sign of anxiety. James shifted uncomfortably, while Tyler suddenly found his water glass fascinating. We managed to get through the rest of the lunch with superficial chatter, but the tension remained palpable. As we prepared to head to the afternoon graduation reception on campus, my father announced he'd made dinner reservations for our family only at Laurel Heights, Berkeley's most expensive restaurant. "We need some family time," he declared, in a tone that brooked no argument. 7 o'clock. My friends looked concerned, but I assured them I'd meet them later for the celebration we'd planned. As we parted ways, Raquel squeezed my arm. "Text if you need an emergency rescue," she whispered. "We can fake a crisis in 10 minutes." I laughed, but a part of me wondered if I might need exactly that before the night was over. The Laurel Heights restaurant was an exercise in old-world opulence, all polished wood, gleaming crystal, and hushed conversations. My father had booked a table in the main dining room rather than a private space, which surprised me, given his usual preference for privacy. The room was filled with other graduation parties, families beaming with pride and toasting their graduates. The contrast with our own table could not have been more stark. My father ordered an expensive bottle of wine without consulting anyone's preferences and spent the first 20 minutes of dinner interrogating me about my decision to accept the offer from Yale over other law schools. "New Haven," he said with thinly veiled distaste. "Another 4 years away from Chicago. One might think you're deliberately choosing locations based on their distance from family. I'm choosing them based on the quality of their education and career opportunities," I replied calmly, determined not to let him bait me on what should have been a day of celebration. "Yale has an excellent reputation," my mother offered timidly. My father continued as if she hadn't spoken. "And this focus on constitutional law? What precisely do you plan to do with that? Spend a career arguing theoretical points while earning a public defender's salary?" Tyler tried to deflect. "Dad, Natalie just graduated with honors from Berkeley. Maybe we could just celebrate that tonight." "I'm merely trying to understand the return on investment here," my father replied, swirling his wine with practiced precision. 4 years of education should lead to tangible results." "My education isn't a stock portfolio," I said, my face flushing despite my resolve to stay calm. "Its value isn't measured in dollars alone." James, ever the peacemaker when it suited him, cut in. "How is your roommate Stephanie doing in her job search? Finance, wasn't it?" "Environmental science," I corrected. "And she's already accepted a position at a climate research institute." My father scoffed. "Another idealist. You've certainly found your people out here." With every passing minute, the tension mounted. Nearby tables celebrated with champagne toasts and warm speeches, while our conversation grew increasingly strained. A family at the next table had just presented their graduate with a new set of car keys, and everyone was laughing and cheering. "Now that's a practical graduation gift," my father commented, his words sharp. "Useful for entering the real world." "I don't need a car in New Haven," I said. "The campus is walkable." "That wasn't my point, Natalie," he replied coldly. The waiter arrived with our main courses, providing a brief reprieve. As we began to eat, my mother made a valiant attempt to change the subject, asking about my favorite experiences at Berkeley. I started describing my work at a legal aid clinic, explaining how we helped low-income residents with housing disputes. "We prevented 3 evictions last semester with pro bono work." My father cut in, slicing his steak with surgical precision. "Noble, but ultimately unsustainable. The legal profession is not a charity." "Some of us believe in using our skills to help others, not just to enrich ourselves," I replied, my patience finally beginning to fray. His knife stilled mid-cut. "And what exactly are you implying about my career, Natalie?" "I'm not implying anything about your career, Dad. I'm stating a fact about mine." The table fell silent. My mother looked terrified. Tyler stared intently at his plate, while James watched our father's reaction closely. "Your career," my father said finally, placing his silverware down with deliberate care, "has not yet begun. Yet you speak with such certainty about your path, despite having virtually no experience in the world." "I have 4 years of internships, clinical work, and research," I shot back. "Just because it's not in finance doesn't make it invalid." 4 years of playing at being a lawyer," he dismissed. Let me tell you what I see. I see a young woman who was given every advantage, every opportunity to excel in a field with a proven track record of success, and who has instead chosen to squander her potential on idealistic crusades. The restaurant seemed to fall silent around us, or perhaps it was just the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the other sounds. "Matthew," my mother whispered urgently, "not here." He ignored her, his focus entirely on me. "Do you have any idea what it's like when my colleagues ask about my daughter, and I have to explain that she's chosen to become a professional antagonist to the very business world that afforded her every privilege?" "I didn't have privileges," I said, my voice rising slightly despite my best efforts to control it. "You cut me off, remember? I worked 3 jobs to get through college. I earned everything I have. With an education funded by my years of hard work building our family's reputation and resources," he countered. "My scholarship funded my education," I corrected. "My jobs paid for everything else." He laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut deeper than any criticism. "Do you truly believe you did all this on your own? That the Richards name had nothing to do with your opportunities? Your naivete is precisely why you are not ready for the real world." The nearby tables had grown quiet, their occupants trying to pretend they weren't listening to our escalating argument. "Dad," Tyler tried to intervene, "maybe we should—" "No!" My father cut him off sharply. "It's time we were honest. Natalie has chosen to reject everything this family stands for. Our values, our careers, even our geographical location. That is her choice, but choices have consequences." He turned his cold gaze back to me. "If you insist on pursuing this path, investigating corporations and undermining the world of business, then you will do it entirely on your own, not with my support, not with my connections, and not with my name." The restaurant was so quiet, I could hear the clinking of glasses from the bar across the room. "Are you seriously disowning me at my graduation dinner?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I am merely clarifying the terms of our relationship going forward," he replied, as if discussing a business contract. "You have made it abundantly clear that you do not respect what I have built or the wisdom I have tried to impart. So be it. Consider yourself independent in every sense of the word." My mother gasped. "Matthew, please!" "Stay out of this, Diana," he snapped without looking at her. "You can't be serious," Tyler broke in. "Dad, this is insane. It's her graduation day." "Which makes this the perfect time to establish clear boundaries before she embarks on her chosen path," my father replied coolly. "Natalie wants independence. Now she has it completely." Humiliation burned through me like acid. All around us, other families were witnessing what should have been a private family matter if it had to happen at all. My graduation day, the day I had worked so hard for, was being deliberately destroyed by the man who should have been proudest of me. In that moment, something inside me shifted. 4 years of fending for myself had taught me my own strength. 4 years of building relationships with people who truly supported me had shown me what a real family felt like. And 4 years of studying the law had convinced me that some truths needed to be spoken. The secret I had carried since high school, the one I discovered in my father's study that had set me on the path to law in the first place, suddenly felt less like a burden and more like a shield. I squared my shoulders and looked my father directly in the eye. "If this is how you want to play," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "then I suppose it's time everyone heard the real reason I chose corporate accountability law." My father must have seen the shift in my tone. A flicker of something crossed his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear, an expression I had never seen on him before. "This is not the place for theatrics, Natalie," he said, his voice a low warning. "You made this a public affair the moment you decided to disown me," I replied, my voice calm and even. "You wanted to do this here, in front of everyone, so let's be completely honest." My mother reached across the table, her fingers trembling. "Natalie, please." "It's all right, Mom," I said, my voice softening. "I'm not angry anymore. I just think it's time for the truth." I turned back to my father, whose face had hardened into an unreadable mask. "When I was 17, I began, I was looking for a stapler in your office. You were in London on business, and Mom was at one of her charity luncheons. Remember how you always kept your desk so meticulously organized? Everything in its proper place." My father's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "I accidentally knocked over that leather box you always kept locked, except on that day it wasn't. The contents spilled everywhere. And as I was gathering the papers, I noticed something odd. Financial documents from your firm, Vestry Capital Partners, but with inconsistencies I couldn't understand at first." Jamie shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Natalie, whatever you think you found—" "Invoices for consulting services that never existed," I continued, my voice steady. "Balance sheets with discrepancies in the millions. And most interestingly, documents detailing settlement agreements with 3 families, the Morrisons, the Guzmans, and the Taylors." The color began to drain from my father's face. "I didn't understand all of it back then," I admitted, "but I understood enough to know something was very wrong. I photographed those documents before putting them back exactly as I'd found them. When you came home and saw my sudden interest in business ethics and corporate law, you thought it was just a phase." I looked directly at my brothers. "Did you ever wonder why Dad was so adamant about me staying away from corporate law specifically? Why he was so threatened by my interest in white-collar crime?" Understanding dawned on Tyler's face, while James looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "You were investigating me," my father accused, his voice dangerously low. "No," I replied. "I was understanding you, understanding why you built our family on this facade of perfection while hiding what you truly were. Those 3 families, they lost nearly everything because of investment advice you gave them, advice you knew was fraudulent. You steered them into investments your firm needed to unload before the 2008 crash." A hush fell over the restaurant, the clinking of silverware ceasing as every ear turned toward our table. "You have no idea what you're talking about," my father hissed, but his typical confidence had faltered. "The settlements you paid them included non-disclosure agreements," I pressed on. "That's why none of them ever spoke publicly about how Vestry Capital Partners, how you, specifically, betrayed their trust. Mr. Morrison had a heart attack from the stress. The Guzman's daughter had to drop out of college. The Taylors lost their home." My mother's face crumpled, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "Natalie, please stop." "You knew," I realized, seeing her reaction. "You knew all along." She couldn't meet my eyes. "Those settlements," I said, turning back to my father, "were conveniently paid out just before James and Tyler started college. Their educations were funded by the financial ruin of 3 families who trusted you." James shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. I'm not listening to another word of this." "Sit down," my father commanded, and James obeyed automatically, a response trained over years. My father leaned forward, his voice a near whisper. "You have no proof of anything. Those were legitimate settlements for investment losses, standard practice in volatile markets." "The documents I found detailed intentional misrepresentation," I countered. "They included internal communications about moving those clients into investments that were doomed to fail in order to protect the firm's preferred clients. That's fraud, Dad. That's why you were so desperate to keep me away from business law. You were afraid I'd connect the dots." Taylor looked stunned. "Dad, is this true?" "Of course not," my father snapped, but the conviction in his voice was gone. "This is why I chose Berkeley," I continued, "not just to get away from you, but because it has one of the best corporate accountability programs in the country. It's why I interned at Goldstein and Parker, a firm that specializes in exactly these kinds of cases. And it's why I'm going to Yale to study under Professor Harrington, who literally wrote the book on prosecuting financial fraud." The realization of how deliberately I had constructed my education hit my father visibly. His face, normally composed, showed genuine alarm. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I'm not threatening you," I clarified. "I'm explaining why I chose my path. I wanted to understand how someone could do what you did, How my own father could justify causing so much harm while presenting himself as a pillar of business ethics. I wanted to make sure I would never become you. My mother's quiet sobs were the only sound at the table as decades of family mythology crumbled around us. Nearby diners were now openly staring, some whispering to each other, others typing on their phones. "Those are dangerous accusations," my father said, pulling his businessman's mask back on. "Accusations that could be considered slander." "Truth is an absolute defense to slander," I replied, my legal training serving me well. "And we both know that what I'm saying is the truth." I stood and placed my napkin beside my barely touched meal. "You asked me to be independent, Dad, to make my own way, completely separate from you. I accept those terms, but understand this. My choice to study corporate responsibility isn't rebellion, it's redemption. If the Richards name is going to mean anything in the future, I want it to stand for justice, not profit at any cost." I looked at my mother and my brothers. "I love all of you. When you're ready to really talk about our family and move forward with honesty, I'll be there, but I will not participate in the fiction anymore." With that, I turned from the table, walked past the staring patrons, and pushed through the ornate doors of the restaurant into the cool Berkeley night. My hands were shaking, but my steps were firm. 4 years ago, I had left Chicago with nothing but determination and a hidden pain. Tonight, I was leaving that restaurant having finally shed the heaviest burden I carried, the truth I had guarded not to protect my father, but to preserve what little family bond I had left. As I pulled out my phone to text my friends, I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out. Whatever came next would be built on truth, not on carefully constructed illusions. My phone buzzed with messages before I even reached my apartment. Raquel, Stefan, and Marcos had started a group chat titled The Emergency Response Team and were coordinating their arrival at my place with ice cream and liquor. I smiled through the emotional turmoil churning inside me. This was what real support felt like. I had barely unlocked my door when my phone rang, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Natalie?" Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm fine, Mom," I assured her, sinking onto my bed. "I'm at my apartment." "Your father is—" She paused, struggling for words. "He's not doing well." "I imagine not," I replied, feeling a strange post-storm calm. "Where are you?" "At the hotel. Your brothers are here too. Your father went for a walk to clear his head." The way she said it made me think clearing his head was a euphemism for something far more volatile. "Mom," I said gently, "did you know? About the settlements? About what really happened?" Her silence was an answer before her words came. "I knew there were problems at the firm. I knew there were settlements. Matthew said it was standard practice, that every investment firm had occasional losses that needed to be resolved." "But you suspected it was more," I pushed. A heavy sigh came through the line. "There were signs, things he would say when he thought I wasn't listening. The timing of certain trips, how stressed he was during that period." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He changed after that, became harder, more controlling, especially with you kids. Why didn't you say anything?" "What would you have had me say, Natalie? Accuse your father of fraud with no proof? Destroy our family based on a suspicion? You don't understand what it's like, having to make that kind of impossible choice." But I did understand, more than she knew. I had been balancing my own impossible choice for years, family loyalty versus my moral compass. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted, and the uncertainty in her voice told me more about how drastically things had shifted than any explanation could. Diana Richards, who had planned every family event with military precision for 25 years, had no script for this. A knock at my door announced my friend's arrival. "Mom, I have to go. We can talk more tomorrow." "Natalie, please." Desperation colored her tone. "Don't do anything with this information. Don't go to the authorities or to reporters. Give us time to figure this out as a family." The request hung between us, the familiar family pattern of papering over uncomfortable truths to maintain appearances. "I don't plan on doing anything right now," I said carefully. "But I won't lie if I'm asked directly, and I won't pretend this didn't happen. That's the best I can offer." She seemed to accept that, at least for now. "I love you, Natalie. Despite everything, please know that." After hanging up, I opened the door to my friends, armed with Ben & Jerry's tequila and worried expressions. They filed in, setting up a makeshift comfort station on my small coffee table. "So," Raquel said, handing me a spoon, "on a scale of 1 to complete disaster, how bad was the family dinner?" I laughed, in spite of it all. "Let's just say I won't be invited to any Richards family gatherings in the near future." As we ate ice cream and took shots, I recounted the night's events. My friends listened without interruption, their expressions shifting between shock, outrage, and pride. "Holy shit," Stefan whispered when I finished. "You actually did it. You called him out." Marco shook his head in amazement. "I always knew you were a badass, but that's next-level courage." "Or next-level stupidity," I countered, the adrenaline finally wearing off enough for doubt to creep in. "I just blew up my entire family in a public restaurant." "No," Raquel said firmly, taking my hand. "Your father blew up your family when he decided to disown you at your graduation dinner. You just refused to be the only casualty." We stayed up until 3 in the morning, dissecting every moment of the confrontation, speculating on the fallout, and eventually just reminiscing about silly graduation memories as the alcohol softened the night's sharp edges. When they finally left, promising to check on me in the morning, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep despite my exhaustion. My phone lit up with a text from Tyler at 4:23 a.m. "Is it true? All of it?" I replied immediately. "Yes, I have copies of everything." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and reappeared several times before he responded. "I always wondered where the money for James's Harvard tuition suddenly came from. Dad said it was a bonus. I need time to process this." "Take all the time you need," I typed back. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about tonight. You deserved better. And congratulations on graduating." My eyes welled up at the small kindness. "Thanks, Ty." The morning brought a flood of messages, some from extended family who had somehow already heard versions of the restaurant showdown, others from friends checking in. Most surprising was an email from Professor Williams with the subject line, "Proud of you." It contained only one sentence. "Standing up for the truth is never easy, but it is always right. My office door is open if you need to talk." I wondered how she'd heard, but then I remembered the small academic and legal world I inhabited. News traveled fast, especially scandalous news involving prominent financial figures. My mother called again around noon, her voice strained. "Your father is flying back to Chicago today. James is going with him. Tyler and I are staying another day." "Why?" I asked, surprised by the development. "Tyler wants to talk to you," she explained. "And so do I. In person, not over the phone. Can we meet for coffee this afternoon?" We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe away from campus, where we were unlikely to run into anyone I knew. When I arrived, my mother and Tyler were already sitting at a corner table, both looking like they hadn't slept. My mother hugged me tightly before we sat down, her familiar perfume bringing an unexpected wave of emotion. Tyler gave me an awkward one-armed hug, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Your father is consulting with the firm's legal team," my mother began without preamble. "He's worried about the potential implications of what was said last night." "Is he denying it?" I asked. Tyler and my mother exchanged a look. "Not to us," Tyler admitted. "When we got back to the hotel, he tried to at first. But when I pressed him, he just shut down, shook his head and wouldn't say another word. He said I didn't understand the pressures of the financial crisis, that sometimes difficult decisions had to be made to protect the majority of clients. Classic rationalization, I noted. "He's afraid you'll go public," my mother said, "or take legal action." I meant what I said last night. I didn't collect this information to expose or blackmail him. I needed to understand why he was the way he was, why our family operated the way it did. But you could, Tyler pointed out. Go public. I mean, you have the proof. They had separated, supposedly by mutual agreement, but Mom was the one who moved out. She's staying with Aunt Patricia for now, Tyler told me, looking for her own place. He hesitated. She's different, Nat. It's like watching someone wake up from a deep sleep. Last week she mentioned she's going to take art classes again. The image of my mother returning to her long-abandoned passion brought unexpected tears to my eyes. She wanted to call you, Tyler continued, but she's afraid you're still angry with her for not protecting you from Dad all those years. I was never angry with Mom, I clarified. Disappointed, maybe? Sad for her, definitely, but not angry. You should tell her that, he suggested gently. She needs support right now. We talked for hours, filling in the gaps of the last 3 months. Tyler described the implosion at home after the graduation dinner, how James had initially sided completely with our father, but slowly started asking his own questions as more details emerged, how our father negotiated a strategic exit from the firm to avoid any investigation a sudden termination might trigger, how the extended family began taking sides in a rift that seemed to be widening rather than healing. It's like watching a carefully built house of cards collapse in slow motion, Tyler remarked. It was always going to fall eventually, I pointed out. Houses of cards aren't meant to be permanent structures. He sighed, his voice heavy. I can't stop thinking about those families, the ones from the settlements. I looked them up. You know, the Tylers eventually recovered financially, but Mrs. Morrison is still struggling after her husband's death. The Guzman's daughter never finished college. The weight of those consequences hung between us, the collateral damage of our family's pursuit of success at any cost. That's why I chose Boston, Tyler continued. The firm I'm joining has a foundation that provides financial literacy and assistance to families affected by predatory investment practices. It's not exactly atonement, but it's a start. A surge of pride for my brother caught me by surprise. That sounds perfect for you, Ty. And you? He asked. Any regrets about how it all went down? I considered the question carefully. I regret the public nature of it. That wasn't my intention. But the truth coming out? No. That needed to happen for all of us. Before he left, Tyler handed me an envelope from my mother. She wanted me to give this to you in person. Inside was a check for a substantial amount and a handwritten note. This is from my personal savings, money that is truly mine to give. I should have supported you from the beginning. This doesn't make up for the past, but perhaps it can help with your future. With all my love, Mom. The gesture moved me deeply, not for the financial support, but for what it represented, my mother reclaiming her autonomy, one decision at a time. As summer turned to fall, other pieces began to fall into place. James finally called after months of silence. I'm still processing everything, he admitted, his voice lacking its usual confidence. But I miss my sister. We agreed to take small steps toward rebuilding our relationship. Occasional calls, honest conversations, no expectation of an immediate resolution. My mother's transformation continued. She found a small apartment in Chicago's Arts District, started her painting classes, and even began therapy, things that would have been unthinkable in her former life as Mrs. Matthew Richards. I'm discovering who Diana is, she told me during one of our weekly calls. It's terrifying and exhilarating. I knew exactly what she meant. I was doing the same thing at Yale, figuring out who Natalia Richards was when defined by her own choices, not in opposition to her father's expectations. Professor Harrington's seminar on corporate responsibility became the highlight of my academic experience. During a discussion on whistleblowers and family-owned companies, she kept me after class. You bring a unique perspective to these discussions, she observed. Personal experience, perhaps? I hesitated before admitting the truth. My family situation is complicated. She nodded, understanding. The most valuable legal minds often emerge from complex backgrounds. They understand the gray areas where others only see black and white. As for my father, the silence between us remained absolute. I heard updates through my mother and brothers, his new consulting gig, his smaller apartment, his constant insistence that he had only done what any smart businessman would have done during a financial crisis. I didn't expect an apology or an acknowledgement. Some people are incapable of that kind of self-reflection. But his absence from my life no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like space to grow. During my first break from law school, I met Raquel for coffee when she was in New York for a conference. "You seem different," she observed, watching me over her latte. "More at peace." "I feel lighter," I admitted, "like I was carrying this secret weight for years and now it's gone." "Do you regret exposing your father?" she asked, ever the one to get straight to the point. "No," I answered without hesitation, "but I'm not interested in any more exposure either. What matters now is moving forward with integrity." That became my guiding principle as I built my new life. Move forward with integrity. Not with perfection, not with the appearance of success, but with genuine integrity in all my choices. Confronting my father wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to participate in a family system built on lies. The fallout was messy and painful, but it was also necessary and ultimately healing. My family was forever changed, fragmented in some ways, but also more authentic than it had ever been. My mother was finding her voice. Tyler was aligning his career with his values. Even James was asking questions he'd never dared to ask before. As for me, I was exactly where I needed to be, on a path that felt true to my values rather than one imposed by someone else's expectations. The journey hadn't been what any of us expected, but maybe that was the point. True growth rarely follows the carefully planned paths we envision for ourselves. Sometimes it demands rupture, painful truths, and the courage to stand in your own story, even if it means unearthing secrets others would rather keep buried. I've come to believe that family isn't defined by silence and obedience, but by truth and mutual respect. Sometimes, building a genuine connection requires dismantling the false structures first. It's messy and painful, but in the end, it's worth it. Have you ever had to choose between keeping a painful family secret and standing up for your own truth? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more about my journey through law school and beyond. And if you know someone who is struggling with family expectations, consider sharing this video. Sometimes, just knowing we're not alone in these battles can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by the expectations of others. It comes from being true to yourself, even when that's the hardest path to take.